you need to take the time, because as part of the marketing team and organization, you sort of take for granted people's expertise and areas of familiarity, and you feel like, oh, everybody knows this, and it's really not fair, because you were along that entire journey.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Sonja O'Brien. She is a marketing strategist who helps small and mid-sized businesses elevate their marketing and build brands that are authentic and feel more human, because people connect with people, not just logos. After 15 plus years leading global brands at a Fortune 100 company, she made a deliberate shift to get closer to the work she loves, jumping into the fast-moving world of digital healthcare. There, she led marketing teams for emerging and mid-sized businesses, shaping brands and go-to-market strategies with big-picture thinking and real-world execution. Now, as an independent marketing consultant, she brings that same expertise to organizations that need senior-level marketing leadership without the full-time hire. She thrives on digging into business dynamics, spotting opportunities, and turning strategy into action. Outside of work, you'll find her likely on the soccer field playing, possibly with her husband, or cheering on their twin boys. She finds balance through yoga, tackling DIY projects, gardening, and volunteering with the Women's Health Leadership Trust. A lifelong learner and explorer, she believes marketing and life should be intentional, achieving, and most importantly, enjoyable. Congrats on your positive impact in digital healthcare, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Carl.
So I love that element in your bio at the beginning that talks about helping brands become more authentic and feel more human. Because I think that's something that so many companies are struggling with, is that authenticity and humanity to their businesses. So how do you go about helping companies build brands that feel more human?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think we're all consumers of products these days, and we all can tell when we're being sold to, right? When organizations start with their own agenda, what they're looking to sell, immediately has an impact. People put their walls up. So it's a futile effort. And so I just think it's so important to figure out how we do this right. And what brands need to do is obviously dig deep into themselves. Who are they? What do they care about? Who is their audience? What do they care about? Figuring out that identity, the archetype, their brand, and really identifying and characterizing both themselves and who they're trying to appeal to. Because if you don't do this, the reality that you see with most organizations is they just start the conversation with themselves, and it's a very traditional, formal conversation that we all have experienced, and you just tune out. It's like, who cares? And so the way I do it with organizations is I take the time and we go deep. I had a project that I did with a former organization, and we found ourselves in a sea of sameness. We all showed up the same. And if you can think of digital healthcare, everybody's striving for the same mind share. Even if you have apples and oranges solutions, you still need to appeal to the same audience, and there's a finite budget. And so we took the time. I did have to really bring the leadership team on board and help them understand the value of that and do some internal selling. I think a piece of it is showing them what success looks like and what good brands have done and how they do it well and how they make that emotional connection. I think also, like, I'm a big proponent of Simon Sinek. I just love the work he does in starting with why. I think that's another way in which you can have a more authentic brand. Is like, why do you even exist, and doing that work? Because that's how the conversation needs to start, is why do you exist? Because that's where the emotional connection will be made, because as we know, decisions are made emotionally, but justified rationally. And as you say, Carl, we're selling to human beings, whether it's B2B or B2C. So what are the problems in the world that this audience cares about? Why do we even exist? Let's make the connection, start the conversation there. And then we have permission to talk about how we're doing it differently and how we're thinking about it. So, you know, that was a big project that we had done with one organization, but I mean, it was a bold shift. I don't know if people are familiar with the archetypes, but there are a number of archetypes for brands that you would oftentimes associate with, to really figure out, how do you want to show up? What is the look? What is the feel? What is the voice? And showing up consistently. And ours was the outlaw, so it has to be a little bold and brash. But if you do it, you stand out, and people are like, you're not okay with the status quo. And you know, at the immediate outset, that work garnered us like an 80% increase in our website traffic. Like, we were driving people to the website. So it works, but it is about really figuring out what that voice is and then showing up consistently.
Yeah, and I think there's so much of that, like you said early on, that because is important on kind of the self-awareness of why the company exists and the people who are involved, what they care about, and then understanding their audience really well. That, again, most companies, they might have like a flimsy buyer persona, or they might think, oh, everyone can use us because we're in such a, they understand, like the company understands their tech so well, they can see all the applications for it. But if you don't have a specific enough focus on one group or one audience, they're not going to make the connections for you. And so it's a lot easier to niche down and focus. And so I think just that awareness early on is a really important aspect of building a strong brand that so many companies gloss over, because they get so enamored with the product and what they find exciting about it, that they assume that whoever they talk to is going to share that excitement. And it's just not how it works, especially in the B2B space, with how busy and overwhelmed like a lot of the decision makers are in the medical space these days. Another tech company waving a white paper in their face is not going to get them to stop and read it, because they have 1,000 other things on their mind and don't see the value in what you're offering yet.
Yeah, I agree. You really need to earn that permission. I mean, a white paper has its place, but that is like 5 steps down the road. Once they're doing their research, they're curious about you, they need like the hard data. At that point, that's where the rational mind will come in. But you know, early on, it's emotional. And so what's drawing them into you? And I do think one of the challenges with a lot of organizations, and I do think it's getting better, but I think a lot of organizations are so risk averse, and it probably is a little bit scary, just like it is as for a lot of us as employees, to feel like we can bring our authentic selves to work. I think it's scary for organizations to not be formal and sort of like, you know, towing that line and looking super professional. And there's a place for that. I mean, it depends on who your audience is, and sometimes you need that level of sophistication. But I think that's where it is important to know your audience. And I think a lot of times they just want to make a connection. And when you put up that type of language, it's a turnoff a lot of times. So you need to have the courage as well to embrace that and acknowledge that if that's where your audience is, engaging in that way will be so much more effective.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of risk aversion because people want like a certainty, or like things that feel safe. But in the marketing world, whatever feels safe is often the exact wrong thing to do, because it's the people who take big risks and stand out that end up getting the big results. And it's also, I think, that risk averse to being vulnerable and putting themselves and being human and trying to really connect with a client on the level you need to really be successful in B2B, which requires a lot stronger personal relationships than just the ones you get from a transaction. And so most people, especially people that are in like leadership roles, aren't great at building those connections personally or professionally, or being vulnerable. They've learned how to put up walls and wear armor. And so there's just a lot of learning they have on the leadership level, and also understanding how the teams need to be communicating, and how the brand voice needs to be reflecting that the risk taking and differentiating and more human element of communication, not being all buttoned on the front business all the time, because there's a huge personal aspect to the B2B side that is what gets those big deals to get all the way through the pipeline. Because yeah, there might be a lot of people involved in a lot of technical things that need to happen, but it's the personal relationships between the salespeople and your contacts and the customer support that is going to keep those things, that pipeline moving in a way that if you just stick to the business side, you're going to miss, and you're going to end up creating a lot more holes in your pipeline than you realize by not having the human element there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and back to the story that I was mentioning at the outset with the one organization I was working at. We took the time to do a lot of training, and it wasn't like, oh, we're launching one and done. You need to take the time, because as part of the marketing team and organization, you sort of take for granted people's expertise and areas of familiarity, and you just feel like, oh, everybody knows this, and it's really not fair, because you were along that entire journey, plus you spend time living and breathing in that discipline. And so we did a lot of training. We made it fun, but did do a lot of training, kind of got to the why it's important, what it looks like, how you show up, and then obviously having that execute all the way through in every single touch point and every interaction. And, going back to sales, I think there are great salespeople. They tend to be very charismatic. They do work on relationships, but I think oftentimes, and I'm speaking from a person who was in sales for many years, it's also, I think they're a little eager. And as a byproduct of that, sometimes you can get ahead of yourself in even just the way in which you pitch and present your solution. And that's could be a potential lost opportunity at a high touch point. So that is even another instance where thinking through the presentations that are being shared and make sure that introduction is set. And, the more customized it can be for that specific client, of course. But just once again, what are maybe the challenges that these customers or prospects are confronting, and setting the stage with that, because it's like, hey, we're listening to you. That's so important. And you make that connection through that. And then, give that a beat. And then you have permission to say, we're trying to do it differently, and we see a better way. And this is the way we're doing it, and getting them excited about that. So I think that's so important to think about that holistically across the organization.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of a problem that a lot of like the marketing and sales language that teams use is very dehumanizing. You're talking to prospects, you're talking to leads, you're talking to the person first.
Yeah.
And it's like, so a lot of the mindset, especially in sales, is like they have all these like the quotas and the funnels, and you see these spreadsheets and or the dashboards, and you forget that you're talking to real people that have real concerns and personal lives outside of work that could be all influencing this business deal. And so there's, I think part of what the value of having a more human centric brand on for a company is if you're already thinking more about people first, then if once you do this training you mentioned and get all the different touch points along the customer journey, more focused on the people and building connections based on what people need at the level of the relationship they're with your brand, that's going to lead to more of like the not just sales but longer term renewals and life cycle or lifetime value for these clients, because they'll feel more connected to the brand and to the experience than a single transaction. And so I think a lot of companies are realizing that, yeah, they might get sales, but the people don't renew after the first month, or they're a lot more like unhappy and they're causing it more hassle, and they end up losing profits in these bad client relationships because they're focusing too much on the metrics and not enough on the people and building real relationships that are mutually beneficial and rewarding at more than just a transactional level. And so I think that what you're talking about with building more human brands helps people shift that mindset from like a sales, for example, just got to close the deal, just got to close the deal, just got to close the deal to, okay, what does my contact need from me right now to feel heard and understood and valued? Because that's what's going to get you the results you want. It might seem like it takes a little bit longer, but then you get more ROI over time because they stick with you, and then they're also become an advocate that's going to be referring you business and promoting the brand, and you get so much more positive value and things that companies are looking for by focusing on the human side of things first. And it baffles me how hard it is for companies to grasp that concept these days.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point of it's so hard when you're looking quarter to quarter sometimes. And then it does become more transactional, but the lifetime value, as you had mentioned, is going to be so much more worthwhile to your organization if you can look at it that way. And well, another book that I had just read was Give and Take by Adam Grant. And, they have, obviously he does a ton of research, and in his findings, it's not hard and fast, but he looks at givers, takers, and I always want to say reciprocals, but basically exchangers. And short-term givers are going to not be the winners. Let's just put it that way. They're not going to come out ahead. So if you think of it that way, then you're going to want to be a taker because you're going to come out ahead for the quarter. But if you look at it as more of a marathon, that's where the givers come out ahead. So if you can start by solving that customer problem and, meeting them where they are and contributing in meaningful ways, it will come back in leaps and bounds, but you do have to be patient, and it's not all about the one for one. It's just, solving problems, contributing, making an impact with helping your clients. And like you said, they're going to be long-term customers with that sort of mind shift.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen lately with some like the trends of like how like SEO and pay-per-click marketing are less and less effective is that we've kind of reached the limit of like the speed at which people can build trust, and like the impersonal kind of broad marketing is is more and more expensive and less effective, because there's only so much of this kind of transactional pushy, pitch slappy stuff that people can handle. And we've reached kind of the cognitive load of that. And so people are craving more connection, more of these relationships, because we're wired that way psychologically. We crave connection and belonging, and we're just not getting it anymore from these companies. And so for the ones that do see the value of building these relationships and playing the longer game and building these really strong client relationships, there it's like a prime opportunity to zig when others zag and build all these relationships and gobble up a bunch of market share, because they're providing this need that all these other companies have kind of let atrophy in their brands for the last decade or two.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think you do have to get out of autopilot and running towards that immediate short-term objective. And it can be hard. You can get caught up on the chaos. You have to like take a step back, pause, think, what do they care about? What's their journey? What's that experience? You got to go deep in identifying, as I had mentioned, like your archetype, your language, your voice, and similarly with them, because the nuance matters. And it does take a little more time, but it pays off. But I think that's the other challenge is people are just racing so fast. And it can be these incremental shifts that, going back to what we talked about earlier, that can just have such a more authentic feel to them. And it goes back to also trust. You're trying to build trust and in confidence and build this relationship. So you can't get there just racing through it, and especially not transactionally. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Sonja. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Sonja, please check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.